So, welcome everyone to yet another night of Sutta and the City, coming to you live from New York City. It's great to be here with you tonight to discuss the uplifting topic of anger, and really glad to be here with you all. So, Stephen, you have picked a poem that's pretty nice for tonight, I thought.
Is that like for a change, you mean?
No, come on now. Don't take it with a dash of ill will.
Are you being angry?
No, not even not even sarcastic, which is yet another form of anger.
There's so many ways to be angry.
Yeah, there
It's
are.
amazing.
They
Who
really
knew?
are. Well, we humans are creative.
Yeah.
We're creative that way. I'm gonna share this poem that you and the little
Now,
web
did you just
page.
say this poem, like in
Oh my,
air quotes? Poem, like sarcastic.
yeah, that sounded sarcastic, but
This
it
so-called
wasn't.
so-called poem.
No, I love Mary Oliver. You see how tone is everything.
Mary Oliver. Yes. Well, this is a snowy picture, and so I think the name of this poem is Wild Geese, and it goes like this. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.
Wow, that's beautiful. The world offers itself to your imagination. Thank you for that. And how does that relate to anger? Well, we'll see. Maybe anger is a choice that we don't have to make.
Hmm. I like the first line and I thought a lot about it. You do not have to be good. And I read it in a way that I interpreted it, which was you do not have to sort of quote, be good, which is different from saying you do not have to be good, because it seemed to me that it was talking about sort of going through the motions as opposed to personally understanding why one should do something, to see the results in oneself rather than just following instructions.
Well, that's what the Buddha enjoined us to do, is to see within oneself. As you mentioned last time, Stephen, this fathom long body. That's where all the action is.
Yeah, and I find it a big challenge for the anger subject to not just read it as a list of instructions or injunctions or orders. I mean, sure, that's a good way to take it. Like a child is told, don't touch that. Okay, mom said, don't touch it, I won't touch it. But unless the person understands why not, it's going to be pretty hard to not touch it again. And so he always stressed personal understanding, not just following a list of instructions.
Well, I like that. And one of the things that has come up, it's this refrain that comes up whenever this topic is brought up, is that anger is an important emotion, that it is strengthening, that it helps us do good things. And this can be true, but I think on the flip side, at what cost? When we look at the experience of anger when it arises, it's mostly an unpleasant experience. It's not fun, it's not joyous, it's not expansive. it just kind of contracts. You can almost feel that feeling of closing in. And I think when a person really becomes attuned to what this emotion does for us, it can make more sense to make the choice to let it go a bit, not to indulge so much.
As you say, feel how it feels in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so I think then we should go ahead and look at the sutta. What do you think, Stephen?
Could be a good choice.
It could be a good choice. Let's make the good choice. And we're going to bring up uh, the new, the old new tip for tonight, which is step up, step back. What does that mean? Well, if you've been kind of in the background or not sharing so much, that's okay. We're not going to drag you out and shine the spotlight on you, but maybe try, because we would love to hear from you, those of you who are less prone to like talk. And then for those of you like me who love to like raise their hand all the time, try taking a step back and let's see how that feels. So we'll give that a whirl. And we will need, having said that, we will need readers. So if you'd like to read, and especially if you haven't read in a while, please raise your hand. We would love to hear from you.
But don't be shy.
Right.
We need at least 7, because there are 7 things.
Okay, my icon to raise the hand is not working. So you can put me down. It's Geetha.
Okay, how about you start then, Geeta?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. And each one of, well, do we really need 7, Stephen?
I don't know. And I have to wonder if anyone is able to raise their hand, because no one has, it seems.
Well, let's start with Geeta and see what happens. Okay, Geeta, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, so numbered discourse 7, Anugatara Nikaya 7. It's 6, the undeclared points. 64, irritable. Mendicants, these 7 things that please and assist an enemy happen to an irritable woman or man. What 7? Firstly, an enemy wishes for an enemy if only they become ugly. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have a beautiful enemy. An irritable person, overcome and overwhelmed by anger, is ugly, even though they're nicely bathed and anointed, with hair and beard dressed and wearing white clothes. This is the first thing that pleases and assists an enemy, which happens to an irritable woman or man. Furthermore, an enemy wishes for an enemy if only they'd sleep badly. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have an enemy who sleeps well. An irritable person, overcome and overwhelmed by anger, sleeps badly, even though they sleep on a couch spread with woolen covers,
Yes.
shag piled pure white and embroidered with flowers and spread with a fine deer hide, with a canopy above the red pillows at both ends. This is the second thing.
Wow, that's quite the bed.
Wow, should I be jealous?
Yeah, snazzy. Okay, another person who hasn't read in a while.
It doesn't seem like people are able to raise their hand.
Okay,
Yeah, that might be a problem.
I don't
that's
know
so
why.
strange.
I don't know how that even can be turned off.
Okay, I will try to see who hasn't read lately. Todd?
Sure. Furthermore, an enemy wishes for an enemy if only they don't get all they need. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have an enemy who gets all they need. When an irritable person, overcome and overwhelmed by anger, gets what they don't need, they think, I've got what I need. When they get what they think they need, they think, I've got what I don't need. When an angry person gets these things that are the exact opposite of what they need, it's for their lasting harm and suffering. This is the third thing. Pardon me. Furthermore, an enemy wishes for an enemy if only they weren't wealthy. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have an enemy who is wealthy. When a person is irritable, overcome, and overwhelmed by anger, the rulers seize the legitimate wealth they've earned by their efforts, built up with their own hands, gathered by the sweat of their brow. This is the fourth thing.
Thank you so much, Todd. Now, these passages are a little obscure. I find this one especially obscure. But in the Bodhi translation, to me, it's a bit clearer. And what is it that was said in the Bodhi translation, Stephen?
This is for the third thing.
Yes.
He has, may he not succeed. For what reason? An enemy does not delight in the success of an enemy. So maybe that's more clear.
It's more clear. Who wants their enemy to do well in life? Never, never.
Is that Schadenfreude?
No, we're not to that yet, Stephen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Don't be mad.
I'm trying, but actually, yeah. Okay. So.
We have Carolyn.
Okay. Carolyn.
Oh, sorry, it's very tiny on the phone, so that's why I haven't normally.
Okay.
But I'm going to try to see it. Are we up to the wealthy part, or we did that?
We're up to, I think,
if
they weren't famous.
Famous.
Oh, okay. Furthermore, an enemy wishes for an enemy if only they weren't famous. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have a famous enemy. When a person is irritable, overcome, and overwhelmed by anger, any fame they have acquired by diligence falls to dust. This is the fifth thing. Pardon the phone. Furthermore, an enemy wishes for an enemy if only they had no friends. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have an enemy with friends. When a person is irritable, overcome, and overwhelmed by anger, their friends and colleagues, relatives and kin avoid them from afar. This is the sixth thing.
Well done, Carolyn, from the phone.
Eagle
Thank
eye.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
Hawkeye.
It's so tiny.
Ayavimala, would you like to finish this up all the way up until we get to the poetic stanza?
Okay. Furthermore, an enemy wishes for an enemy, if only when their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. Why is that? Because an enemy doesn't like to have an enemy who goes to a good place. When a person is irritable, overcome, and overwhelmed by anger, they do bad things by way of body, speech, and mind. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. This is the seventh thing that pleases and assists an enemy, which happens to an irritable woman or man. I didn't understand that last sentence. These are the seven things that please and assist an enemy that happen to an irritable woman or man.
Thank you so much, Ayavimala. And it is a bit convoluted the way it's translated. I agree with you. So which part was the confusing part, Ayavimala? Was it this last sentence or?
The very last sentence, yeah.
Right. So this is the seventh thing that pleases an assistant enemy. So basically what they're saying, and I hope I'm going to translate it in real speech correctly, is when you're angry, these bad things will happen to you and your enemy is going to be happy.
Yeah.
Right? So the enemy is our enemy, but the enemy is anger. And the anger is what turns back onto us and causes harm. So what is the moral of the story, Stephen?
Be nice. Or don't be angry. Or when you're angry, you primarily, for the most part, hurt yourself. And then when you're hurting yourself, your enemy can rejoice in your hurting.
It's true. And I want to just make sure, because I know that I've said this before, we're not saying don't ever be angry. We're certainly not saying you don't have the right to feel angry. But I think kind of what the Buddha is saying is that anger doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us well. And I know, especially nowadays, there's a call for people to have righteous anger, right? And there's this belief that if people don't have righteous anger, then in some ways they're bad. I'll be honest, I have, I guess, what you call righteous anger. I have a lot of anger about my greatest anger is about, you know, the planet and what's happening to the species, and it's very, very painful for me. But what I know on an intellectual level, I'm sorry, somehow Alexa, but what I know on an intellectual level is that that anger is very painful. It can cause burnout, and it's not helping the Pacific sea otter uh, fend for its life and not fall prey to extinction. In other words, anger is never something we should nurture, if that makes sense. And by the way, Ayavimla, did I help to make that last sentence clear? I don't even know if I did.
You did, and I think part of it is the grammatical structure of the sentence is just it's great.
It's a
So,
bit odd.
yeah.
But I think at least for this seventh thing, the point is when somebody is angry, an angry person, they might, after death, have a negative, unfortunate rebirth. And that negative rebirth, if the enemy somehow would know that, it would please them. It would
Right.
please them to see the angry person or the enemy suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get that now.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, it's always pleasing for the enemy to see the other person suffer. And so it's important that we don't inflict this suffering upon ourselves. And
I have to say, Regina, I have a slight bone to pick with this sutta because I'm not so fond of this idea of drawing up these lines between enemies and friends or enemies and non-enemies. Because it seems like if you do have metta, then you don't really have an enemy. You know, somebody might not like you, but you don't have negative feelings towards them.
yeah, I agree. But I mean, when I read this, I actually don't even like the use of the word enemy at all in the sutta. But there are those who wish us ill, whether we wish them ill or not. They're going to be at least sometime in our life, whether in the past, the present, or the future. There's always going to be someone who doesn't like us and has ill will towards us, right?
Oh, definitely. There will always be that person who wishes us harm. And so, therefore, the question is how do we react? Do we get angry, which therefore makes them happy because we're sort of reacting to their enticements? Or do we somehow stick to our meta guns, so to speak, and not play their game, right?
Right. Right.
Because it's probably for somebody who wants to sort of bait you and make you mad, it's probably pretty frustrating for that person to just have you say, it's all good. I'm happy. I love you too. And they probably would just think you're being sarcastic. But yeah, and I think maybe for me, the most important thing, the message to take home is to try to see what happens when you're angry. And so we get this whole list of negative things that happen to the angry person. And they all are pretty undesirable, and they get sort of worse and worse as we go along. Culminating in like going to an unfortunate rebirth. And so there's really no way that's stated here that we can be angry and have a good outcome.
Right. There's not. Depending on, there's no way to have a good outcome in how we feel about ourselves and how we feel when we're feeling the anger. And whether we know it or not, when we are exhibiting anger, even if we think that we're hiding it, others can see it, and it repels others from us. It repels others from wanting to be near us. It repels others from wanting to help us succeed in life. It repels others from wanting to feel happy when we succeed. And instead, it has the effect of others kind of not necessarily wanting good things for you. It's unfortunate, but that's sort of how it goes. And I wanted to share an example because I like the title of this, Irritable. You had discussed, I think it was in our last session, Stephen, about the various types of anger, and one being irritable. And anger is the thing that grows. All of our emotions can grow. Happiness can grow. Anger can grow, depending on how we feed it and how often we feed it. So these tiny irritabilities that we may experience. Oh, my keyboard's stuck. Oh my God, the internet's so slow. Why is my seltzer? It's not fizzing, these things that can just, and then when you're constantly irritable, it leads to the state of unpleasantness. And I just want to share something. We all live some amount of time of our life every day, probably on the internet, whether it's on our cell phones or on our laptops. We probably get a portion of our news from the internet. And I wanted to share with you an example of anger, maybe righteous anger, and maybe some of you might have the same type of experience when reading the news. And this seems really quite minor. And I'm sharing it as we speak. It was in the New York Times. I think it was yesterday.
Yes.
It was yesterday. Okay. I'm amazed Stephen read it too. Okay.
I wasn't angry.
Well, I have to tell you, I read this article. I saw this title and I'm like, oh, yes, I got to read this one. Because for those of you who aren't familiar, we New Yorkers are most of us are very, very not pleased with this building. Yeah, it used to be the tallest residential building in the world. And I forgot who broke that record soon thereafter. But the problem is it's right at the foot of our park, Central Park, and they broke air rights. I don't even know how that happens. You see,
They had a special workaround
for the air rights. Don't even get me started. Air rights are a big deal in New York City. But this tower is at the foot of Central Park, so it leads to a shadow going over the park. And, it leads the way to all these other ridiculous towers. This tower is huge. I think it's got like 82 residents or 82 apartments. So I won't even get into the insanity of that when we are in this city that has major homeless issues. So I'm already experiencing anger. But what happened was I was really jazzed to find out that here on Billionaires Row, this building is an absolute disaster. And it's so tall. Oh, the rich and the beautiful live there. It's so tall that the water in the toilet swishes. Sometimes when it's really windy, the cables and the elevators will slam back and forth, and then those elevators have to be shut down. Lots of plumbing issues, lots of leaks, very difficult the water pressure is not good. I love that one because my shower has great water pressure. So do you see what's happening? And look at that, 2,500 people writing in. Yeah, we eat the rich. We don't like them. Russian oligarchs. So what is happening is, I will share with you one of my favorite German words of all time, if I can find it.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, bringing out the German.
Breaking out the long words.
Yeah, yes. Well, now I can't find it. Here it is. Bringing out Schadenfreude. I'll just say it. Schadenfreude. Probably a lot of us have heard it. Maybe not every one of us, because it is, after all, German. But what does Schadenfreude mean?
Schadenfreude.
Pleasure derived by someone from another person's misfortune. You're unhappy and I'm glad about it. Well, this seems really harmless to like be extremely jazzed that these multi-billionaires are having plumbing issues and their apartments sound like a wind tunnel. But really, what is happening when I'm having these thoughts? What is it that I'm nurturing? Is it loving kindness? Is it creating more housing for the homeless people of New York when I'm like, yeah? Or am I feeding this sense of contempt, resentment, anger? I mean, I don't mean to be a killjoy, but what I'm doing is I'm feeding anger. I'm feeding this insatiable beast that is very unhappy. And this is righteous. You know, I don't like it that we have homeless people. I don't like it that we have poor. I don't like it that we have like trillionaires. But to wish ill upon others, is that part of our Buddhist practice? I don't know. Stephen, you had a story about what you saw. I'm not really on Facebook. And by the way, my account got hacked. So I can't be on it.
Yes.
I apologize for any of you who received untoward messages. But Stephen, you were saying that you saw some things on Facebook about this article.
Well, I noticed that several people posted it and said, "Oh, where's my violin? I feel for these people." And of course, they were being sarcastic, and how some woman had $500,000 worth of water damage in her apartment. And they said, "Well, anyone that has $500,000 worth of water damage, I don't feel bad for them, whatever." And it was definitely a rejoicing in their misery, or what might be their misery. But of course, exactly as you say, this energy, this posting on Facebook, this reading, this mental activity doesn't affect these wealthy people one iota in a negative way at all. It also doesn't really help one disadvantaged person one iota as well. And so all it does is really make us angry. It's very tricky. The mind is so tricky. We trick ourselves into thinking we're being happy. There's the Freude. But the Schaden, the damage, the negative, the suffering is there. And so it's like a self-inflicted wound. We think that it's pleasurable. It's all about wrong view, essentially. We think we find pleasure in the unpleasurable. We think that we're getting pleasure from this thinking, but if we look at it more carefully, we can see that, in fact, we're harming ourselves. And that's painful to even realize, because one starts to realize that all those irritation moments we have across our day are all a little bit like little cuts to our own body. Self-inflicted wounds that build up. And imagine if we could go through our day without any of that, how much more happy we would be. And so it's always very challenging to separate out a sense of social justice, perhaps, or a sense of equality, and an understanding of what we might be able to actually do to make things better with this kind of, as you described, Schadenfreude, irritation, indignation, etc., etc.
Right. And of course, just to follow up, it doesn't mean that there are things that we shouldn't strive to make better in the world. But without anger. That's the goal. I'm not saying that, I'm perfect in that goal. I mean, when I read that all 82 residents of that huge building hated each other's guts, I was really, like I said, jazzed. Oh, like,
Some
that's
people
awesome.
have referred to that really tall building, that really tall, narrow, alone building, as a giant middle finger applied to New York City. And it's not a great place to be mentally.
Right. It's not. In fact, it's not too far, not to bring it up, but it's too late. I just did.
Oh.
It's not too far from the Trump Tower. And when I used to walk by there the last 4 years, I would see people walking by and shoot the middle finger to the tower. I never did that, but it's the anger again. I'm not saying I love the guy or anything like that, but we have to care for ourselves and our karma. It's a karmic thing. So yeah. So this is just like an exercise, because we're on the internet and we're on social media so much, to encourage y'all to mindfully go through the internet. I remember when I was on retreat once with Sayadaw Utejaniya, and I had a lot of anger. As I had mentioned, my background is one of an aversive. And he had said that he taught his monks to be on the internet mindfully. And I thought that was insane. I'm like, that makes no sense. You cannot do that. But what I have learned is you can, again, staying with the body. And when the body starts to like do that internal cringe, or there's that rejoicement, that little adrenaline hit when someone's, made a fool of themselves once again on Twitter or something, to recognize that as a danger zone and an entry point to anger and a feeding of that. So I'm wondering if others of you, it's a very difficult topic. And again, we're not saying anger is bad. We're just saying recognize. So if any of y'all have any questions or thoughts about this, because I know that we've brought up a lot.
I had a few things to share about that. I think a lot of people have that resentment or inner joy when someone else is not doing well. And it's a very, very negative, dark place. And we should be extremely mindful of trying not to go there. And how I always think of it is, even if somebody is filthy rich, I think that they earned it in another life and they did some good karma. Perhaps they gave a meal to a Rahatan Vahansi or to a Buddha, and this is maturing in this life. So we should wish them well, because whatever wrong they do, it's their own karma. They're the owners of that karma. We should be neutral and wish all beings happiness. And I know it's a different way of thinking. And I think it's very important to train our mind and our thoughts, so that we understand it through a Buddhist perspective, or the teachings of the Buddha, because people work hard and make a living too. So, I mean, sincerely, we would be happy for them. So even if these people we see in the world doing lots of wrong things that are not moral, they may have, to enjoy those riches, they may have done some great good karma in a past life. But all those bad things they're doing now, that's their own karma, which they have to answer to in the future, sometimes in the very present life. So, and us holding on to that, exactly like what Stephen said, we're harming ourselves and we're cutting our own skin. So why would we ever want to do that? So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta. And I think I am seeing that it's difficult. Stephen, you were able to raise your hand, but
I figured it out.
Okay.
You have to go, actually, I was told how to do it. You have to go to the reactions button on the bottom right, And then
Okay,
there's a thing to raise your hand. So maybe it has
I see.
changed.
Okay, well I guess that's in the latest update.
Oh,
Now we have some other hands.
Yay. Okay, so Anfang.
Oh, hello everyone. My question hopefully is not off the topic, but uh, I I heard from one of the lecturers saying that hatred and anger is not actually what binds us to samsara, but the asava is. I'm not trying to undermine anger, but I don't know how to make of it.
The asava.
I didn't understand. Can you
Sorry,
say it one more time?
I heard from one of the lecture that anger, hatred is not what actually bound us to samsara, but the asava is the factor that bound us to samsara. So I don't know how to make of it because I find anger is a very powerful emotion. I know it's come and go, but it's not a factor that bound us to samsara. We all want to escape samsara. So what can I make out of it?
Well,
Thank you.
okay, I think I understand. So in other words, anger itself will not keep us bound to samsara. Okay, I think for me, remember when the Buddha says in the Dhammapada, all things begin in the mind. And that's why the mind is such an important thing for us to train. And I just know from my experience, when I do have that anger playing in the background, it rarely stays in the background. It often comes out in ways like, if I keep thinking bad thoughts, I'll just say about my roommate. I mean, I'm getting a new one, so I have no bad thoughts. My other ones were fine too. But if I do keep having these thoughts of anger, that's not necessarily going to keep me bound to samsara. But what happens is, for me anyway, I may not be strong enough to engage in right speech, right action, and wishing ill will upon someone, I think definitely does have a karmic of stain. And Stephen, I would like to hear you elaborate on this because it is, I want to go back to anger is a powerful emotion. It's not that we're not supposed to have it, but we have to be careful. Stephen?
I thought you said it very well. It's a negative emotion. It's not desirable. It prevents us from having a happy mind. It messes up our meditation, right? It's very hard to, I mean, if we want to say that maybe the big goal of Buddhist practice is to be happy, and then being angry is not being happy, well, then why would we want to cultivate anger? Or maybe that's why we'd want to cultivate not anger, non-anger. Yeah, it's not something that is beneficial.
I hope that helps a little bit on.
It probably, I would say, falls under the umbrella of kamasava, which is the asava of sensual desire or passion. Because when we're angry about something, we don't want it to be that way. We want to push it away. It's a desire. It's a negative desire.
It is a desire. And another thing that I think is really important about anger is it is an avoidance of dukkha. It is our mind's attempt to pretend that things can be other than what they are. So when I am angry at this tower and how they should have used all that money for helping homeless people, it's because I don't want to feel the pain of inequality, of homelessness, of suffering. I don't want to have to see it. It's the pain leaves me feeling weak, but the anger, I feel strong when I'm angry. So it's this illusion that I'm feeding myself that I can avoid dukkha, and we just simply can't, no matter how angry we get. Sophia?
Thank you. For me, it's very difficult to understand this metaphor of the enemy, because I guess that most of us are not acting because someone is happy or someone is frustrating about what we do. Honestly, for me, it's very difficult to pay attention that we have enemies. We have, it's very difficult for me to understand only the angry or the angriness as an expression of hate, because sometimes, most of the time, people express angry because they don't know how to express sadness or another kind of feelings. Then for me, angry is like a summarization of what we don't understand about ourselves. This is one of the things. Then I cannot measure my life because another person is judging me. Anyway, it's impossible for me. For this reason, it was so very difficult for me to get this text as an enemy and be happy or sad because of the enemy, because this is like dialectic of the two sides. And then if we are happy, then my enemy is frustrated and angry. This is the dialectic. I have to be happy to avoid the enemy who be happy. I don't like this text. For me, it was difficult to accept this text as a beautiful passage from Buddha. The second thing is that I never consider that the rich person is happy. Because happiness for me doesn't have to be with having money. And I know that money is, by the contrary, about people being happy.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm sorry, we had a little bit of a hard time hearing you. It sounds like you've got a roommate in the back there, but
So
that's okay. But I do understand the discomfort with the use of the term enemy in this sutta. I do get it. And Steve and I did talk about it. I think the important thing is to remember the line that the Buddha said, that no enemy can hurt us more than our own mind. So essentially, we have to look at this within the context of how often our mind can turn on us and be the enemy of our own happiness and joy, rather than an outside force. Stephen?
I agree. I mean, often the biggest enemy is one's own mind. And you and Regina and I talked about the riots that happened in Washington, D.C., and how we were all so concerned. But then I said, well, maybe we should be concerned about the riots in our own mind. And it's one of the things that the anger does is make us less aware of what's happening for ourselves. And we were always looking out.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. We have about 30 seconds left. Susan, did you want to?
Yeah, just a quick one. So to me, I don't think it's anger. At least speaking for myself, no, I don't harbor anger to people who are rich. What I harbor, it would be envy or jealousy. Envious that how did you get such a good life? And not everyone becomes rich because of hard work, as Gita said. It's not that. How many people are born into the right womb at the right time and come out as prince or use sex to marry into a rich life? Many. So what is it? My enemy is my own jealousy. My enemy is my envy. And why am I envious? I don't know. And when they hurt, I'm not happy for their pain. What I'm feeling is, wow, okay, you are kind of like me. You can get hurt too. So there's a bit of a common grounds there. That's my point.
Thank you, Susan. I do think that there's certainly envy when we perhaps look at this. And of course, envy is, it's greed. I want what you have, right? And once again, this is one of the hindrances. So it all goes back to sort of creating an unpleasant way of being, which we don't want to do. So I'm hoping that this was in some ways fruitful for y'all. And I want to encourage you to go ahead and kind of pay attention to how you are on social media, when you're looking at the New York Times, the Post, or whatever it is. It'd be great to hear some of your stories if you awaken to something that before you hadn't realized. Like, wow, I'm reading all of these articles that make me angry. Maybe I want to feel this way. Maybe it's comfortable. Maybe it makes me feel superior. Whatever it is, it would be super to hear. And we want to give a big shout out to the Malaysia contingent. Thank you so much for your, Donna, your generosity. That was very, very heartfelt, and it was very moving to us. And if anyone else here would like to offer Donna, you can do so on our website at suttainthecity.com. Meanwhile, we wish for you to have the utmost happiness. So please do what you can to create that. And we will see you next time, and we will help co-create that together. Happiness in this world and the next. Thank you all, everyone. Have a great evening and morning.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you, Regina.
Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.
Have a good night. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Be
Thank you.
well, all of you.
Thank you. Be
Thank
safe.